everybody, with Perik Chavtes, Tisha Ve'estrim of Hilchos Shabbos. We've almost finished Hilchos Shabbos. We had a lot more of the complicated halachot, and now this parak is going to be a much easier one that more of the concepts are familiar going into it. We're going to deal with Kiddush and Havdalah. So stay tuned as we go through the halachot of Kiddush and Havdalah as the Rambam sets them up. Again, Parak Tisha V'Estrim, Halacha Aleph, the first one. Mitzvahs asim in aTorah lekadishim haShabbos b'dvarim. It's a positive commandment from the Torah to sanctify the day with speech. Shenemar, like it says, Zachor es yom haShabbos lekacho. You should remember this day lekacho to make it holy. Kolomar, the rabbis understand this to mean Zachreu zechira Shabbat v'kiddush. You should remember it. How should you remember it? You should remember it in a way of Shabbos, of Shevach rather, of praise and of holiness. And you have to remember it, so to say, mark it, both when it enters and when it leaves. When Shabbos begins, that's called Kiddush. When it leaves, we mark it by Havdalah. So in other words, it's a regular day of the week, and we bookend it at the beginning and the end with holiness by making special mention. At that point, it retains a kind of a new flavor of Kedusha, different than the rest of the week. Beis, the Rambam continues too. This is the liturgy of the Kiddush. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzah banu. Hashem, who chose us. With Shabbos, country, and Shabbos, he gave us with great love and this desire to bequeath it to us. Zikar Lamaisa Bereshis reminds us of the story of creation. Shabbat is the first of all these special holy days. It reminds us of leaving Egypt. We have chosen us from amongst all the nations. Again, Shabbos, your holy day, with love and with your desire, you have bequeathed, you have given to us. Baruch atah Hashem, Mekadesh HaShabbos, blessed is Hashem, who sanctifies Shabbat. A lot of interesting, rather, a lot of Siddurim you might see have a little bit different nusach, different the formula of Kiddush, different words, Fardik, Ashkenazik, etc. But this is the Rambam. And Zeichel Yetziat Mitzrayim, because there's twice that the Aseret HaDibrot are said, twice the Ten Commandments are said, once in Exodus, once in Deuteronomy. The first time in Shabbat, it talks more about the Ma'aseh Bereshit, the story of creation. And the second time, the verse seems to imply more that Shabbat is because we were slaves and we left Mitzrayim, we left Egypt. So we sort of make mention of both of them in the Kiddush. Gimel. The third one in the Rambam continues. This is the formula of Havdalah. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hamavdil bein kodesh l'chol, who separates between holy and mundane, bein or l'choshech, between light and darkness, bein Yisrael l'goyim, between Jews and the nations, bein yom hashvi l'sheishis yemei ha'maisa, between Shabbos, the seventh day, and the 6 days of work. Baruch atah Hashem hamavdil bein kodesh l'chol, blessed is Hashem, who separates between holy and weekday. That's Havdalah. Daled, Ikra Kiddush Balayla, the Rambam now continues. Now that we know what Kiddush is, what are the halachot of Kiddush? The main Kiddush, the primary mention of Kiddush is at night. As we said before, you remember it when it begins, to bookend it at the beginning. If you did not do it at night, whether intentionally or unintentionally, you can go ahead and say Kiddush the entire day. As a matter of fact, there's an opinion in Shulchan Aruch that if you did not say Kiddush at night for some reason, you fell asleep before Shabbat began and you woke up the next morning, when you make Kiddush by day, you should add that paragraph which we just read of Baruch atah Hashem Shekidishanu v'Ratzah Banu v'Shabbos Kachir b'Ava. That paragraph you should say even during the day Kiddush if you did not say it at night, because that's the primary aspect of Kiddush. What happens if you did not make Havdalah Saturday night? Make it on Sunday. and you go ahead and make Havdalah, say Havdalah until the end of the fourth day. But you do not make a bracha on the candle, only on Motzei Shabbat. Two comments. Halacha today dictates, and many argue that the Rambam's opinion actually is only until the end of this third day, not the fourth day. So in other words, if you did not make Havdalah, you have Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday to make Havdalah. If you did not make Havdalah Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, you no longer can make it for that week. And number two, he says that only on Saturday night to use a candle. And the reason we use a candle to begin with is because their first Saturday night of creation, Adam and Chava found it dark. They're out of Gan Eden, and it was the first dark kind of sad night. And they didn't know what to do. And Hashem showed them how with two boards or two stones, they could kind of create a fire. So we have fire to commemorate that creation. That's why we say Bora Me'ore, who creates the fire, as we're creating it, if you wish, at that point. But we don't do that on Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday. Halacha also says that you don't use spices except Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. The idea behind that, we're going to also get into later on. Spices are to revive the person. The Gemara tells us that you have two neshamot. An extra one is given on Shabbat. Neshama yetera, an extra neshama, an extra soul, an extra measure of holiness comes into you in Shabbat. And as it leaves after Shabbat, you feel faint. The spices are kind of to revive you like smelling salts and allow you to be able to continue to function. So we don't do that on Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday, only on Saturday night. Halacha hey. Once the night begins, Friday night, Shabbat begins, you cannot eat or drink until you make Kiddush. And on the reverse side, you cannot begin to eat or drink or do work or taste anything, the Rambam says, until you make Havdalah. You can drink water. There's a debate if the Rambam says you can drink water only before you made Havdalah or also before you make Kiddush. And most opinions are only before Havdalah, but before Kiddush, you should not even drink wine. Again, some machlokes is in the later opinions. An argument that's brought out later. What happens if by mistake you forgot, or you went ahead and for whatever reason you ate or you drank before you made Kiddush or before you made Havdalah? Then you can still go ahead and make Kiddush or make Havdalah after you've eaten. Vav, number 6. The Chacham teach us the Kaddish ala yayin, lahavdal ala yayin, that you should make Kiddush on wine and make Havdalah on wine. When they say you should commemorate the holiness of Shabbat at the beginning, at the end, with speech, but the speech should be said upon a cup of wine. And even though you said it during davening, you said Yom HaShvi'i in middle of Friday night services, or you said Atachanatanu in middle of Saturday night Maariv. Nonetheless, you have to still do it on the cup, which means on wine. After a person made Havdalah and said, I separated between holiness and the weekday, you can go ahead and do work even if you did not make Havdalah on the cup yet. In other words, Shabbat ends, you can say Baruch HaMavdil Ben Kodesh L'Chol and do some work until you get to Havdalah. You shouldn't really postpone Havdalah if you can help it. But say you need to get to Shul and they make the minyan a little bit later, you want to drive, so you would say Baruch HaMavdil Ben Kodesh L'Chol, drive to Shul, and then make Havdalah when you come back home. And then you should make bracha, the Rambam saying, on wine to begin with, and then you should make Kiddush. Let me see, you say first Bar Priagafen, and then the second bracha, Asher Kiddushanov. But don't wash your hands for Hamotzi until after you make Kiddush. There's an opinion that says you should wash before Kiddush, so your hands are clean, and then make Kiddush, and then go ahead for Hamotzi. The Rambam says we don't do that. Zion 7. Ketzad says, so what is the order? What do you do exactly? Take a cup that holds in it a revi'it. A revi'it is a sizable amount which we need in halacha. It's about 3.3, so 3.5 ounces, somewhere around there. Or more, obviously. And you rinse it out and you dry it out inside and outside. You wash the cup around. And you fill it up with wine. And you hold it in your right hand. And you lift it up from the ground a handbreadth, a tefach or more. But small, and don't hold it with your left hand, only your right hand. You make the bracha by gafen, and then you make the kiddush. In the minig of everyone, the custom as we do is to say vayichulu, the chapter about Shabbat from the story of creation beforehand. And then you make bar gafen, and then you say kiddush. And then you drink a cheekful. In halach, in order to be yotze, in order to fulfill your obligation, you puff up a cheek, so to say. You drink as much as it would take to puff up that cheek. And then you give a little bit to everybody else sitting there. And after that, you wash your hands. And then you make hamaitzi and you eat. Interesting footnote. The Rambam says you lifted up a tefach from the ground. Obviously, in those days, I guess in the Arab countries where the Rambam lived, you sat on the ground. But for us, it would mean you've lifted a tefach from the table. Ches. Here's a very important halacha that not everyone pays attention to. Kiddush is only good when it's in the place of your meal. Ketzah, what does that mean? You're not allowed to make kiddush here and then eat your meal in another house. According to the Rambam, if you're in a large ballroom and you make kiddush in one side of the room, you can still eat in the other side of the room. It's a debate later how long is the best way to do it or not. But the Rambam says you are in one room, it's okay. But a second house, a second place is not good. What does that mean? The Rambam doesn't spend too much more time on it right here. But it means, practically speaking, when you hear kiddush in shul, or you hear kiddush at home, you need to have challah or mizonot or more wine. If you do not have one of those, you have not fulfilled kiddush. So if you're standing in shul and the rabbi makes kiddush and you take a sip of wine and then you decide not to eat anything, when you go home, you need to make kiddush again because that kiddush did not count. On the other hand, if after the rabbi made kiddush, whether you had some wine or not, which you don't technically have to drink wine from the kiddush, but let's say you did, and then you sat down and ate, washed, and had a piece of challah or ate a piece of cake or whatever, when you go home, you don't need to make kiddush again because you already had your kiddush b'makom suda. And it's something very important to remember that whenever you want to be yotze kiddush, make sure they have something to eat, mizonot, hamotzi, or according to some opinions, another revi'at of wine separate than the kiddush. Test number 9. What if a person likes bread more than wine? Or he did not have wine. So then you should go out and wash your hands for bread. And you should say the hamotzi instead of the hagafen. And then you will make kiddush, say the kiddush paragraph, and then you should cut and eat your challah. Okay, but Avdallah, you can't do it challah, you can only do it on a cup of wine. So if you cannot drink wine or you don't have wine, you're allowed to make kiddush on challah, you're not allowed to make Avdallah on challah. Good. If somebody went ahead and intended to make kiddush on wine, but by mistake he washed his hands for challah before he made kiddush, then he should go ahead and make kiddush on pas, because otherwise his washing and almond yadayim would be in vain. So this way, right away say kiddush on the challah, and then it's not a problem. And you can't make kiddush as an interruption between the washing and the challah. Now the Rambam is telling you something interesting. Remember that the main primary aspect of kiddush happens Friday night when Shabbat begins. Now I'm telling you there's also a mitzvah to make a bracha on wine on Shabbos day before you begin your meal. Now you have to have 2 meals or 3 meals on Shabbos, at least 2 full meals and a third meal, whatever we count, however we count that. But before the second meal, you make kiddush. And this is called the great kiddush. Rabbah doesn't mean great according to some, according to means the rabbis, because the rabbis instituted it. Mevarach by Pragafen, Milvad V'Shesed. All you say is by Pragafen, which is why by the Kiddush and Shabbat day, after we make the bracha by Pragafen, we don't have any other interruption because there's no real Kiddush to be said then. And after you make that Kiddush, you will go ahead and wash your hands and eat your challah and eat your meal. And a person should not eat anything before he makes Kiddush. And this Kiddush too, this Kiddush during the day should also be in the place of a Suda, like we said before. Get Aleph, 11. A person can make Kiddush on the cup Friday night, while it's still Friday afternoon. So say the summer, Shabbat begins at 8 o'clock, and you have little kids in your house, or you're tired, you want to make Kiddush at 7 o'clock, supper time. You're allowed to do that. Said something interesting. You're even allowed to do that for Havdalah. You make Havdalah, Shabbos ends at 7:30, you allowed to make Havdalah at 6:30. Even though it's Shabbos, because the mitzvah that we told you to bookend Shabbos means not literally the moment, but around that time. So if you do a little earlier, it's fine. Practically speaking, many people make Kiddush earlier and start their meal earlier. There's a conversation, a halacha later on, whether it can be, how early is too early. And generally speaking, what we call a Shah, Revia, what's called Plag Mincha, is a time you can look in calendars, like it's an hour and a quarter of special halachic hours before Shabbat begins. So it's roughly an hour and a little bit before Shabbat begins. But Havdalah, you don't practically see anyone doing this, although halachically it would be okay. Yud base 12. Here's the cases differently. Friday afternoon, you sat down to eat because you were hungry. And you started talking and eating and talking and eating. Next thing you know, it's Friday night. And you're still in the middle of your meal. What do you do now? Paris mappa, do you paris mappa, you place a tablecloth over the table and you make Kiddush. And you finish your meal, and then you will bench. And then you say Berchat Hamazon. So in other words, you make Kiddush in the middle of the meal and it will count for Kiddush, for Shabbat, and you continue eating the meal, and then you'll do Berchat Hamazon at the end. So what if on the other end of a Shabbat, you're eating your third meal, and you're eating, and suddenly Shabbat ends, and you're still in the middle of your meal. So you should go ahead and finish your meal, whatever it is, and then you should say Berchat Hamazon on the cup. Some people hold the cup when they make Berchat Hamazon. And then say Havdalah on that same cup. And you'll see many shows if they're doing Sudash Nashit and they're planning to go late and they're using a cup for benching, that they put the cup down after Berchat Hamazon, after benching. And then later they daven Marav, and then after Marav they come back to that cup and use it for Havdalah. If you're not in the middle of a meal, rather, but shtia is just you sat down to have a drink, and you're sitting and drinking with some friends, and suddenly you realize Shabbat ends. The Rambam says then you have to stop. You have to stop your drinking and make Havdalah on the cup, and then you can go back to your drinking. Yud Gimel. In other words, if it's the middle of a meal, you finish the meal. If it's just drinking, you have to stop. Yud Gimel. If you were eating and you finished your meal as Shabbat began, so then you're eating Friday afternoon, you finish your meal, and suddenly as you finish your meal, you realize that Shabbat's beginning. So you bench, you take Berchat Hamazon on one cup, and then you make Kiddush on another cup. Do not use the same cup now. Why? Because we do not use two mitzvahs on one cup. Because Kiddush Friday night and Berchat Hamazon are two mitzvahs min Torah, so we do not use them on one cup. So therefore, you have to use it as a separate cup. Yudalad 14. You can only use wine which you are allowed to pour upon the mizbeach for a wine libation. During the mizbeach and the altar, they had wine libations, and you were only allowed to pour certain kinds of wine. Therefore, if you added honey, or some kind of yeast, another fermentation of some sort. Even if you put in a drop, in a large cask, you have a large cask of wine, you pour in a little bit of honey, a little bit of this se'ar, and you can no longer make kiddush out of. This is the halacha in all of the West, the Rambams of where he lives. And there is someone who says you're allowed to use this type of a wine and honey or this other stuff added. That when the Gemara tells us that we're not allowed to use wine which cannot be used for a wine libation, it's only coming to exclude wine that has a bad smell, or was left open overnight, or was cooked or boiled. So the Rambam comes along and says that the first opinion tells you that anytime you add any little thing into it, even a little bit of honey, even a little bit of fermentation of some sort of yeast, you can't use it because that such a wine cannot be brought as a libation. Then the Rambam says there's a second opinion that says no, it's only excluding wine which was left open overnight, which we don't use because we're concerned maybe poison. We learned that back in Hilchos Deot. Or maybe wine that smells bad. Obviously, it's already started to turn into vinegar, which we'll learn more about in the next halacha, more clearly about vinegar. Or it was boiled. Now, it happens to be that many people use wine which is boiled today, such as pasteurized wine, or even extra boiling. And even nowadays, you get fancy kosher wines which are mevushal, are boiled. And there are a number of reasons for that, and there are a number of other opinions who don't agree with the Rambam and say that even wine which is mevushal, you are allowed to use. 15. It's wine which tastes like vinegar, even though it has a bad smell. I'm sorry, even though it smells like wine. In other words, the smell, you pick it up and you think it's wine, but it tastes like vinegar. And you got my kiddush on it. If you took the sediment of a wine cask and poured on it water, this water is not wine, it's water on top of sediment. The Rambam says, 1 minute, let me qualify this statement. I pour 3 cups of water and I find 3.5 cups. But if I pour 3 cups of water onto the sediment and then I find 4 cups, which means I remove the cup of actual wine from the sediment, that's considered yayin mazer, because in those days the wine was always too powerful, too heavy, and they had to water it down. And the halacha was you could do this ratio of 3 to 1, 3 water to 1 wine. So here in this case, you're finding the same scenario. So bottom line is, pour water and sediment is not ideal, but if you manage to pour 3 water and get back 1 equal part of the 3 of wine, so a total of 4, that is still fine to make kiddush. 16, a cup that was holding wine, even if it had many revias, many of these measurements. So let's say you have a cup that has 20 ounces. I said you need 3.5 ounces for kiddush. So I go ahead and make kiddush on this 20-ounce cup, but I drink 5 ounces. I'm left with 15. 15 is a lot more than 3.5. The Rambam says you cannot drink this. You cannot use it rather for kiddush because it's called pagam. It's already been used for a bracha and it loses some of its specialty. You don't make therefore a kiddush on the rest of it because it's considered like leftovers and you won't want to do that. There are opinions that you can pour new wine into the cup and then pour back into the bottle, and then it would be good. So if you use the big cup and you don't want to drink it all, add a little bit of wine from the bottle back into the cup, and then pour the cup back into the bottle, and then you can make kiddush on the wine. But just to pick up that cup as is, you wouldn't make kiddush on it again. A wine that smells like vinegar but tastes like wine. We're looking at the taste here. This water we were just talking about, where it's mixed and watered down to the right proportions, can also make kiddush. And yain semukin is raisins. You can make raisin wine. And this is the raisins have such still Lachluchias is like the moisture, the liquid within them. They're not dry raisins, but the raisins, if you squeeze them, you'd still get out a raisin juice. Those kind of raisins, you could make water and mix with those raisins and make kiddush. V'chein yain chadish migitza mikadish olav, water that's fresh from the vat, from the cask, or fresh water, not the cask, sorry, from the press. If you press wine, press olive. Let me start it again. If you press grapes, the wine that comes out of that, you can make kiddush on. The Rambam continues. You can take a cluster of grapes, squeeze it, get out wine, and make kiddush. Medina should get, which is why, according to many, that's how we know you can use grape juice, because grape juice is wine. Grapes which are squeezed, but they're not fermented into wine. The Rambam saying it doesn't need to be fermented into wine. Even straight squeezed, fresh juice is also fine. Then the Rambam continues, Medina Shrev Jain is Sheikhar. A country that the majority of its wine is really beer. In other words, the main drink in the country is beer. Af al pishu pasal kiddush mutal havdalah. Even though you can't make kiddush on it, you can make havdalah on it. Hayav chamar Medina, since it is the drink of the country. Then the Rambam continues, just like we make Kiddush as Friday night and Shabbos begins, and make Havdalah when Shabbos ends. Kach mekachin, so too we make Kiddush below Yom Tovim, Mavdilim, Matzeh, Matzeh Yom Kippur. We make Kiddush as Yom Tov begins, we make Havdalah when Yom Tov ends, and Havdalah after Yom Kippur. Clearly we don't make Kiddush on Yom Kippur, but we make Havdalah on Yom Kippur, after Yom Kippur. Shekulam Shabbos is Hashem, because they're all considered Shabbos to Hashem, they're all special days, and they need those bookends of Kedusha to lift them up. And after Yom Tov to Chol HaMoed, the days in between days in Pesach and Sukkot, we also make Kiddush. Shabbos and Yom Tov. And Saturday night that goes into Yom Tov. So if Yom Tov was on a Sunday, we make Havdalah Saturday night. But if Yom Tov is Thursday night, Friday, you don't make Havdalah between Yom Tov and Shabbos. And the gist here is, when you're going to a harder level of stringency, you don't have to make Havdalah. But when you're going down, you do. So Yom Tov to Chol HaMoed, you go down, because in Yom Tov you can't do many kinds of work, which Chol HaMoed you're allowed to do. Same thing in all the other than Yom Tov to Shabbos, you're going up. But Shabbos to Yom Tov, you're going down, because on Shabbos, you can't cook, you can't carry. On Yom Tov, as we'll learn later in the laws, you're allowed to cook and you're allowed to carry under certain circumstances, which means that you go into lighter load. Once you go into lighter, you would make Havdalah. 19. Nusach Kiddush Yom Tov. The Rambam now tells us what is the Kiddush of Yom Tov. What do you say? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu mikol am, who's made us holy of all nations, lifted us up of all languages, and he lifted us up and he made us great. This is more Sephardic. You may not recognize these words in Ashkenazi, but you made us great and you chose us to make us special, to make us pretty. Hashem gave us Yom Tov for joy, holidays, and special times for happiness. As Yom Tov Mikra Kodesh this holiday, and then you say Chag HaMatos, Chag HaShvos, Chag HaSukkos, and you say Zaman Cheresenu, Zaman Matot Teresenu, Zaman Tzivchasenu, whether it's with Pesach, Sukkot, or Shavuot, you call out which one you say Kiddush for, the time of our redemption, the time of our giving of the Torah, the time of our joy. Again, remembering leaving Egypt, Hashem chose us from among the nations and made his special days holy through joy. And we say, the close was the bracha of Hashem who makes the Yisrael, the Jews at the times holy. And again, we reference Zmanim means times literally, but here we reference the special times. The entire book of Rambam we're doing now is called Sefer Zmanim because it deals with Shabbat and the holidays and special times. Rosh Hashanah, you say, But Titilon Shem Kiravis Yom Tov Bikar Kodesh, as you add in the middle, that Hashem gives us this Yom Tov, Yom HaZikaron, this day of remembrance, Zichron Chua Ba'avot, to remember blowing the shofar, and then the rest is similar, and the bracha ends. Baruch HaKim Van V'Chadjes Zani Dash V'Kolamid Baruch HaEmes V'Kayim La'ad, and your word lasts forever. Baruch Atah Hashem Melech HaKol Haaretz Mekadosh Yisrael V'Yom HaZikaron. And instead of the time that we remember this, Hashem who makes us, the Jews, holy, and this day of remembrance. V'im Chali Op Shabbat, and if Rosh Hashanah and Shabbat coincide, Chosam Mekadosh Shabbat Yisrael V'Yom HaZikaron K'derech Chosam Batfilah. As you finish during davening, which we read in the laws of davening, you will finish who makes Shabbos holy and the Jews holy and the Yom HaZikaron, that they remembrance for Rosh Hashanah. Chafalov below Yom Tov Mekadosh Al Yain Ki Shabbos, a night of Yom Tov you make Kiddush just like on Shabbat. V'imei lo yain Hashem Yisabel Pas Mekadosh Al Pas. Same thing, if you have no wine or you want to eat challah, you can make Kiddush on challah. And we also have this Kiddush Rabbah, this Kiddush during the day, which is just Bar Pirkafin. 22 Chav Beis Ketzah Mevarchim B'Lo Yom Shchaliyos Be'echad B'Shabbat. On if Yom Tov falls on Sunday, we said you have to make Havdalah between Shabbat and Yom Tov. So how do you do that? The Rambam says the beginning Mevarch Al Gafin, you make Bar Pirkafin. Then you say that paragraph we just read, which is special for Kiddush for the holiday. Then you make the bracha bara me'orei ha'esh, because in the holiday you can use candle, you can use fire. As we said, for cooking, you can light a fire. So therefore, for Shabbat ends, and now we can use this fire. We make the bracha bara me'orei ha'esh. Then you see the special paragraph of Havdalah, and then and when you conclude that paragraph, you finish Hamavdil, who separates not between holy and mundane, not between Shabbat and week, but between holy and holy. Because Shabbat is holy and the Chag is holy, the holiday is holy. But still there's different levels, so we need Havdalah. And then you make Shechianu. If it's a holiday, you make a Shechianu. The Rambam says, when do you say Shechianu? 23. Every night of Yom Tov and every night of Yom Kippur. In other words, the beginning of Yom Tov, beginning of Yom Kippur, we say Shechianu. And on the seventh day of Pesach, the last holiday of Pesach, so you have the first day holy, Chol Hamoed, and then the last day, we have 2 days outside of Israel. You do not say Shechianu Mishein Regel B'Fnei Atzmai. It is not a holiday for itself. It's the seventh day of Pesach. You said Shechianu for Pesach, and that counts for the entirety of the week. Chavdal 24. Say the Havdalah b'Matzi Shabbos. Now we're going back to how is Havdalah on a regular Saturday night. Mevarch al Yayin, make the bracha on wine. V'acharkach al Psamim, and then on the Psamim. V'acharkach al Ner, and then on the candle. The Ketzah mevarch al Ner, Bar Ma'orei Ha'esh. How do you make a bracha on the candle? The Rambam says, Barei Ma'orei Ha'esh, creates the lights of the fire. Ma'orei, by the way, is plural. According to many, we have to have 2 flames. It was meant by 2 flames, 2 wicks in the candle, or 2 matches altogether. Then you see the special paragraph of Havdalah. Now you might recognize that we say a paragraph before we begin. Hine kel shazi eftach, and all that. And that the Ramon Shechanech says we had to have bracha for the coming week. Excuse me, but it's not actually part of Havdalah. It's an addition for bracha. Actual Havdalah, as the Rambam says, is Bar Priakafin, Bar Min Ibsamim, Bar Me'al and then the bracha of Hamavdu Ben Kodesh L'chol in that paragraph. 25. You do not make a bracha on the candle until it becomes fire. What does that mean? Until you can have benefit. Until you can have benefit. In other words, a flame that you're not using is just an empty flame. Here you want to show that the flame is there for benefit. How is that? If I held your Canadian quarter and an American quarter without good light, you're not going to be able to notice the differences on them. They both look about the same. So the Rambam says how Gemara uses that expression that when you're able to see the difference between coins of one country and coins of another country, that's how you know you have the light. What do we do today? you see many people will look at their fingernails to be able to differentiate their different fingernails or to see the flame reflection in their fingernails shows that you're benefiting from the light. Some say, and the Rambam rather says you don't make a bracha on a candle which comes from non-Jews. Because generally, if you walk by and you see kind of, in other words, if you get a candle from a non-Jew, possibly came from the church, because that's where they had candles in those days. And you cannot use a candle that comes from Avodah Zarah, idolatry, or a candle that comes from the dead. In other words, candles they use especially for light, especially for the dead. Those type candles are not used for Havdalah. 26. A Jew who lit his candle from a non-Jew's candle. A goy Yisrael, or a non-Jew lit from Yisrael, and then you have that candle in front of you. Mavarchan olav you can use. Because there's a Jew involved, it started with the Jew, in a sense, or the Jew took it as a separate candle. It's not the original candle of the non-Jew, so therefore you can use it for Havdalah. If one non-Jew takes a candle from another non-Jew, we don't make a bracha on it because we have the same concern like we had before of idolatry. You're walking outside the city, or you see fire, you see light in the distance. If it's known to be a non-Jewish village and you don't make a bracha because perhaps that fire is coming from a idolatrous situation or idolatrous celebration. But if the majority is of a Jewish village, then you would make the bracha. Halacha, we follow majority when we can. Let's say majority creates the situation. Fire that comes out of a stove, or different types of ovens and stoves. To begin with, you should not use that to make the bracha. What if you have just coals left? The fire burned down and you have coals. If you place a kisim, like a splinter of wood, into the coals and it will catch on fire, that means there's enough fire in there to burn this wood, that there's enough fire to make a bracha. The candle, the light of the shul. If the base mention not a shul, base mention is the place where they learn. If this place where they learn had a special Rosh Hashiva, a special person, and that's where they lit it, then you do make a bracha on it. Shul base kenases, which is a shul. Kenases literally means a gathering place, but here we mean a shul. Synagogue is if there's a cantor who lived there, in other words, someone who took care of the synagogue who lives there, you make a bracha then on this. Mitzvah min hamufcha. As we said before, a flame, avuka is a larger flame, is the preferred way to have the mitzvah, not just a single strand of candle. You don't have to run around to find the candle, find the light. Rather, if you have it, you make the bracha, and if not, you go on and say the rest of Havdalah as is. Chav Zayin 27, the Rambam is continuing the laws here of candles. Like a candle that was lit on Shabbat for somebody who was sick or a lady in childbirth. Shabbat, you can use that. You can use that to make a bracha Motzei Shabbat. Fire which you create by rubbing two sticks together, two stones together, like a flintstone type scenario. You can make a bracha on Motzei Shabbos. Because as I said before, that's when fire was created by Adam, by the first human to make fire. So we're reenacting that scene by saying, if I make you fire, it's also good. But Yom Kippur is different, and you cannot use it. On Yom Kippur, we use only a fire which existed on Yom Kippur. We did not use it, and now we will go ahead and use it. Even though it was lit on Yom Kippur for a sick person, or for a lady in childbirth who needed a light or candle, you lit it. Shavas me'aveir, because it rested from Aveir. In other words, the logic here is very simple. Yom Kippur, if I have a fire burning, when it comes Motzi Yom Kippur, and Yom Kippur, I say I can take this fire and make a bracha bar me'areish. But if I make a new fire, there's no distinction between this fire having its usage from before. Saturday night, I'm referencing the creation of fire back from the beginning. So therefore, I can even use a new fire, as fire was created then. Yom Kippur is not on Saturday night many times. So Tuesday night, I don't have that aspect. So the aspect of why I'm making the bracha is to say before I really was not able to use it. Shabbos, it rested. Today I am allowed to use it. On a regular holiday, we can use fire. Therefore, we don't use fire in Havdalah because it never rested from us. Yom Kippur rested from us, but it's not the creation moment of fire. So therefore, you need to use a fire that was there on Yom Kippur, rested, and I can use now, and not a newly created fire. Chavches 28, Yom Tov Shechali is be'emtza Shabbat, Emer ba'Havdalah. What about if you had a Yom Tov and a Shabbat coinciding? You say Amalta Beked Shechal Menor L'Chish Minstolo Yemish Fil Shishim Ma'asek Shabbat. You go ahead on Yom Tov that's in middle, rather not that coincide, that's in middle of the week. On a Tuesday, let's say, you make the regular Havdalah like you make on Saturday night for after the holiday. Because you're counting the differentiations that Hashem creates in the world between Jews and non-Jews, holy and non-holy, and Shabbat and weekdays, in other words, holy days and non-holy days. So we're saying the same expressions, and we're allowed to use the same expressions. But as we were talking till now, you don't use a candle, and you don't use spices on a holiday. Candle because you could use the candle all the day. Spices because you don't have an extra measure of soul. Neshama Yetera on a holiday, at least not the same way as on Shabbat, and therefore you don't need to revive yourself as it leaves. You don't have that faith. And you don't use spices on Matzah Yom Kippur either, because it's the same idea of Shabbat, of a holiday, unlike Shabbat. It doesn't have that extra measure of soul. Chavtes 29, Shabbat. Here the Rambam explains what we've been saying. Why do you use spices on Matzah Shabbat? Because the soul is yearning and grieving for the loss as Shabbat leaves. You go ahead and give it a good scent, a good smell to kind of reinvigorate and rejuvenate it. And that's the end of the parak.
Thank you.